Uh, Welcome everybody to this Teaching and Learning Week session. We've decided to do this one online, and it's a little bit different to some of the other sessions, particularly if you've been attending some of the other sessions this week, because this one is focused more on the research side of teaching and learning, and specifically our higher degree research students. As the little blurb for the session indicated, the format of the session is really to give uh, all of our participants today a bit of an overview of some content that we're developing for our HDR AI Hub. In the process, I think there will be lots of ideas for you about the use of AI in high degree research that you may or may not have thought about before. Certainly, we will try and answer any questions that you've got. But I wanted to set the scene just by giving you an overview of what we've been working on and some of the things that we're thinking about in that space. And then I've invited Amber and Thomas, Fran Spinelli, and Stan Karanasios from the business school, who have been working with us on some of this stuff, to form a panel for a Q&A session around AI use and higher degree research. So that's a quick overview of the session. Before I launch into it, though, I just want to pause briefly to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet, and to pay our respects to their ancestors and descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. And as I read this acknowledgement, I do wonder what the Indigenous people of Australia think about AI and what they make of all this. I know, as a non-Indigenous person, I couldn't have imagined 5 years ago sitting here couldn't have imagined that I'd be talking to you today about this thing called AI. And of course, here we have tens of thousands of years of Indigenous history as well. And it strikes me that this is really something that is quite new to all of us. Um, so what I wanted to do was to start by talking about a little project that we've been working on in the graduate school, called the UQ HDI AI Hub. And then I'm going to unpack for you what's in that hub, and through that process, I'm hoping that that will surface some ideas and discussion and thoughts about AI use in higher degree research. If you don't have any higher degree research students that you're supervising at the moment, I think a lot of the content is also going to be relevant to other types of research students, so master students or honours students. A lot of the issues around AI use in the production of a thesis are really much the same. And also, if you're a researcher yourself, I think you might get something out of this session, because a lot of the issues we're going to be talking about are also more broadly relevant to research, which is why we've invited Amber to be part of the panel today. So this idea of a HDR AI hub really came out of the UQ student AI hub, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But our aim today is really just to introduce you to this idea of a hub, to get your feedback, to refine and enhance the hub, to give you an overview of the key components of that hub, to then also give you a feel for the next steps, to see how we're tracking. So we've got about an hour and a half to do that. So the AI Hub, as I said, really came out of the bigger project that Kelly Matthews and Dom McGrath and others. I apologise if I've forgotten some key people who are involved in that project. It was really a very big project to create an AI student hub, which is now hosted by the library, and it provides lots of great guidance for coursework students around the use of AI in their studies, and particularly in their assessments. But we realized pretty early on that student hub uh, uh, was not aligned with higher degree research students. So it talks about coursework and course coordinators and assessment and uses the language of coursework. And there are some other issues attached to research that hub didn't cover off. And so the idea of having a parallel higher degree research AI student hub came from there. And so we've been working on that for the best part of 3 or 4 months now with an advisory group, including the three panel members that you'll meet today, helping to develop the content for that hub. And the idea is that it would also be hosted at the UQ Library online as a resource alongside the AI Student Hub. So a great resource for high degree research students, but also their supervisors. As part of that broader AI Student Hub project, the university did do quite a broad, large scale survey of students to try and understand some of their challenges and issues um, around AI use. And about 300 higher degree research students responded to that survey. So we have quite a lot of data about higher degree research students and some of the frustrations they face. I think it would be fair to say that the survey told us that people really wanted more guidance and advice about AI use. And when I say people, I mean not just the higher degree research students, but also the supervisors who are trying to supervise those students and trying to provide advice. That raises the question of why haven't we got guidance already? I must admit we've held off doing something like this uh, for a few years because we wanted to see how the space developed first. I think we are now in a really good place where we have a pretty clear understanding of the position that some publishers have adopted, but also we have a lot of external reference points that we can draw on to help us put together this hub, which will become a living resource. So it's not one of those things where we finish it and then it's done. We expect that it will continue to evolve as the space evolves. The picture of Pandora is there for a reason. I feel like AI is a little bit like Pandora's box. It's been opened, so AI is now out there, and we've got to learn to live with it and think carefully about how it might be able to um, help support higher degree research students. And that's very much, I guess, the underlying philosophy around our approach to AI, as you'll see in a minute. I should also say, if you've got some questions or thoughts as we go through the content, please do use the chat for this online session. We would love to hear from you as well. And there are points in the chat where I am going to ask you for your feedback and your comments. This is just a screenshot of the AI Student Hub. If you haven't seen it, well worth checking out, particularly if you're teaching coursework students, because I think it's a great resource. But it will also give you a feel for the direction we're heading in with higher degree research students. So our thinking at the moment, and we're looking at finishing up the content for this hub late this year or early next year, and then there'll be a period of time where the library will need to work with that content to get it online. But our current thinking is to start the hub by having a little section that explains to high degree research students what AI is. Not too technical, but just a brief kind of overview of AI and some of its potential research applications. We then have a set of principles for responsible AI use, which I'm going to share with you in a moment because I'm keen to get your feedback on those principles, but they are heavily based on work that Amber and Thomas has done through the PVC Research Office to set some principles for AI use in research in general. So not just HDR students, but for all researchers at UQ. And we've just tweaked that a little bit for the HDR context. We thought the best way to structure and organize this would be to look at AI across the higher degree research life cycle. So all the way from when a student starts their Master of Philosophy or their PhD with us, through to examinations and what the implications are for the examinations of theses and oral examinations and so on. And so our approach has been to, in the content, to generate a series of scenarios or examples that step students through different applications of AI use, and when it might be okay to use AI and when they might want to pause and use caution, or when they shouldn't be using AI. And I'm going to step you through 5 of those scenarios today. At the moment, we're up to 18, and we don't have the time and space to share all 18 with you, but I'm going to share 5 of the more common ones with you, just to give you a flavor or a feel for what those scenarios look like. And we'd love your feedback on whether the format and the structure of those scenarios is useful as well. We also want to be very clear and upfront with our higher degree students about the limitations and risk of AI. We are asking students to declare use of AI in their theses. Our thesis template was recently updated, and it has a declaration table very similar to what is suggested for coursework students for their assignments. So we're trying to be consistent as much as possible with what's happening in the coursework space, because of course a lot of our students do come through that coursework space up through honours and masters into the PhD. And if they stay with us at UQ for that whole journey, we don't want to confuse them by doing something completely different to what's happening in the coursework space. And this resource will also have a set of curated links to AI tools and UQ-specific training modules. We run workshops in the career development framework, and Stan, who I introduced earlier and is on the panel today, runs some of those workshops for us. This is also a place where we'll be able to pull together all of that support in one place as well, and that will obviously continue to be updated as those support resources change and evolve. So that's a little bit of an overview. I want to pause at this point and ask for your feedback. Is there anything obviously missing from this slide that you think should be in a HDR AI hub? If you've got some ideas, just pop them into the chat. If you think there's something that you'd like to see, perhaps you're a supervisor or maybe you're a PhD student yourself. Maybe there's something there that you expected would be in the hub and it's not there. So I'm going to keep moving through, but if you're thinking about that question, please do pop it into the chat. Okay, so what I want to do is now unpack what was on that previous slide for you in a bit more detail to give you a feel for where our thinking sits currently at UQ around AI use and higher degree research students. And it would be fair to say that there's a broad spectrum of different disciplinary differences. Generally, when we've asked for feedback, we've found that some of the humanities and social science areas are much more critical and skeptical about the use of AI. The common, I guess, line that we get from some humanities and social science areas is that that writing is thinking, and so when you think, you're writing, and those two processes are intertwined. And so the use of AI to actually help you write your thesis may diminish some of that thinking that goes on. On the other hand, in some of the STEM areas, and particularly in some of the science and engineering areas, the feedback we've had from some of the supervisors there is, well, the writing is just a tool. The real work is the experiments or the data collection or engineering the problem that you're trying to solve. So if AI can help students articulate that better, we don't have a problem with them using it. And so we've got a pretty wide range of different responses across the university. And the challenge for us as we craft a guidance document is to make sure that document represents that broad spectrum of different responses to AI. So one of the things that you won't see on the slides, but that will be in that document, is we will always be reminding students to check what the disciplinary norms are in their discipline, and to check with their supervisors. I think it's critical from my perspective, as a supervisor myself, that if my student is using AI, I would want to know that they're using AI, and I want to know how they're using AI so that I can mentor and support them around what some of the risks might be. But some of the principles that we're looking at, and these are the ones that are heavily based on what's been done in the research space already at UQ, is that um, as part of being a researcher, we want higher degree research students to have some level of AI literacy. So there's actually a new competency or skill that we need to develop in our higher degree research students. So that means understanding the capabilities and limits of AI tools. And some of those limitations are fairly broad ranging and are sometimes discussed in the media. So the impact of AI on the environment and sustainability, for example, I think is an important dimension that we want people to understand. That when you plug something into a prompt, that there is sometimes enormous computer power and electricity demands that have an environmental impact. We also need our high degree research students more so than our coursework students to understand the copyright and IP implications of using AI. And there are also Indigenous data sovereignty issues as well. Transparency. So our view is that when higher degree research students use AI, they should disclose that, as I've said before, and we've already provided a framework to do that in the thesis. We will also be suggesting that when students use AI, they should be keeping some kind of log or record or a notebook or a journal. That's just good practice in research anyway, to remind yourself of what you did a year or two ago. So we're trying to normalize this idea of capturing and recording when you do use AI in your research, so that when you have to disclose it, it's a smooth and easy process. Accuracy and verification is another key principle. So we all know that AI can hallucinate, perhaps less so than it did 2 years ago, but it still hallucinates and makes stuff up. I'm a heavy user of AI myself. I find examples of it almost every day. And you have to get very good at prompt engineering to actually get the AI to check itself and to critique its own responses. And of course, there's still human judgment and verification involved in that process as well. But I've got a 20-year career as a researcher. I have a lot of expertise and experience already that I can put into that process of verifying what the AI gives us. Some of our higher degree research students don't have that experience or their expertise. So the key challenge for us is how we upskill our students and how we remind them to verify AI-generated content using scholarly sources and factual information. Accountability is a really important principle for us in this space. Our position is that HDR candidates are fully responsible for any content that's generated using AI. And so that goes hand in hand with the point about transparency and verification. The notion of scholarly integrity is also really important. So the position that we're working from at the moment, the principle that's underpinning a lot of the scenarios and the advice we're providing students in the hub, is that AI should be used to support your thinking and not replace it. And that's really the simple kind of line or foundation of everything that we're working on. In other words, the final work needs to reflect the candidate's own reasoning and contribution. Data privacy and security. The other dimension that is, I guess, important for coursework students, but even more significant for higher degree research students, often working on cutting edge research topics and issues, is that sensitive or confidential information going into public AI tools creates a huge risk for not only for the student, but also for the university. So UQ is trying to develop a sovereign AI capability. We haven't really got that yet. we're telling people to use Microsoft Copilot, but it's not really a sovereign AI tool. And we've seen examples where information put into our enterprise version of Microsoft Copilot has leaked out, and we've had some IP leakage of that. So even that platform is not as secure as people might think it is. And so that's a really big challenge for us, is how we manage those issues around data privacy and security. But the principle is that we're working from is that if you're working with sensitive or confidential information or IP that could leak, you've got to think twice about entering that into an AI tool. So in other words, that's a fancy way on the previous slide of saying know what the tools can and cannot do, be transparent, verify the accuracy, own the output, ensure it's genuinely yours, and protect data and security. So the key takeaway really is that AI should augment your research capabilities, not replace your critical thinking and scholarly contribution. So I can see in the chat there are some comments. I'm interested on your comments on these two slides as well, whether we have the principles right or whether there is something that we haven't thought about that should also be on this list of principles. And while you do that and contemplate that question, I'm just quickly going to scan through some of the chat comments. There's a comment here saying it would be great to also have on the slides progressively or single slide links to the web pages. Yeah, so those pages don't exist right now, but when we've built them, that's a good point. Nadia says, do thesis examiners also receive information on what responsible use of AI means in the UQ context? Yeah, Nadia, once we've built our guidance, we will need to go back and work on the information we give examiners to make sure that they're clear about UQ's position on AI. We are trying to align what we're doing at UQ as much as possible with other Australian universities. But of course, the context can vary significantly, particularly once you go overseas. Some universities are very conservative around AI use, and others are much more relaxed about it. And we certainly don't want students to be unfairly examined because they've used AI in a way that we've suggested, but an examiner has taken offence to that. Kirsty says AI literacy includes understanding ethical considerations and making informed choices about AI tools and use. Yeah, absolutely. There is an ethical dimension, and I'll touch on that on a subsequent slide. So if you've got any other comments about the principles, just pop them into the chat for me, or if you've got some questions about the principles, we can also have a look at them. Stephanie says, I think that even if an AI model can do something, HDR should consider if there is a viable alternative that is more transparent. The research process needs less black boxes, not more. That's a good point. We'll have a look at whether we can capture that as well. So I did want to, before I launch into more of the content, just touch on AI limitations and risks, of which there are many. And as I've noted, there will be a section in the AI Hub that presents some of these risks, but I'm keen here also in your feedback as you scan through the slide and as we talk on whether there are some limitations and risks that we haven't covered off on here. So if you've got any others that you'd like to suggest should be on the Hub, please pop them in the chat. We'll collect all of this information and try to incorporate it into the Hub. But I guess first and foremost, the most obvious one is that AI can hallucinate. It fabricates references. It's better than it was a few years ago, but it still seems to make stuff up. And if you're not an expert, sometimes it actually looks like those references are legitimate. So it will pull real authors that have written on that particular topic and make up plausible sounding journal article titles in journals that actually exist. So asking an AI to write a literature review paragraph can be hugely problematic for people who are not experts, particularly if those authors then don't go and check that those resources actually exist. It also, if it's not outright hallucination, can sometimes just misstate the facts, which is obviously a big problem in a PhD. There is bias embedded in the training data, and that particularly links to the point about Indigenous knowledges and sovereignty and information, but also to other areas of research because it can distort the analysis and the arguments that a student might be making. It can flatten the nuance and weaken the academic voice. So the critical thing for us, for our HDR students, we want their academic voice to come through. And if AI is flattening that or changing that stylistically or adjusting the tone, that's really a problem. And so you'll see when we start to talk about some of the scenarios, our advice to HDR students is always take the text that an AI has given you and make sure that it's written in your own voice. So it needs to be verified, checked, but also written in your own voice. Public tools, we touched on this already, can store, reuse, or leak data. So I won't labor that point, but there's a big risk in this space, and something if you're supervising high degree research students that you should be concerned about as well. I know my students are using AI to help them edit their paragraphs because most of them are non-English speakers, and I think Fran might touch on this because this is very much her research area. But it does concern me that some of the information my students might be putting into the AI could be leaking. And so their original and novel ideas may be leaking out and being used by other people when they then write journal articles or submit publications. In the STEM areas where you might be working with sensitive IP, that is an even more critical point to be aware of. Over-reliance on AI can mask weak critical thinking. So AI can make it look like something is really well thought out and well articulated, but actually the AI is not the critical thinker. The student is the critical thinker and is actually really good at masking weak critical thinking and reducing originality. And that is a problem for us because the number one criteria that examiners are asked to, or the first criteria examiners are asked to assess a PhD thesis on, is whether the work is original. Not all publishers, journals, or funders allow all forms of AI use, so this becomes even more tricky for higher degree research students who are doing a thesis with publication, where they might want to take some of those chapters and publish them as journal articles. So while we might allow the use of AI in a thesis, if a student then tries to publish that with some of the major publishers, they potentially may run into trouble. So that is another variable to be aware of as well. AI can sometimes sound very confident as well until you start to push it a little bit and challenge it, and it's quite interesting to see how an AI will flip-flop on a particular topic as you have a discussion or a chat. It's sycophantic. It will try to please you. Particularly ChatGPT is very sycophantic in its responses, and that can make it sound very, very confident. But of course, it's not evidence, and that is what underpins scholarly research and thinking. So outputs always need to be checked against scholarly sources. Are there any other limitations we haven't thought about? Any risks? If you think of any, pop them in the chat. I'm keen to hear what you all think and what keeps you up at night and what concerns you, particularly if you're supervising higher degree research students, and we'll try and capture those as well. While you're doing that, I'm going to have another scan through the chat. Yes, Alexis talks about Microsoft being based on OpenAI. David makes a good point there that Copilot has enterprise data protection, but it does leak, and we have found instances where it does leak. Yeah, so there's a good discussion there on the chat about enterprise AI systems. I think the bottom line is they seem to be safer than using a public AI like ChatGPT. But of course, the temptation for people is to use ChatGPT or Claude because generally the quality of the responses seems to be better at the moment than Copilot. But you've really got to weigh that up because the public AIs do leak more. So I think it would be it would be unfair to say that our enterprise AI, Microsoft Copilot doesn't leak. It does leak, doesn't leak as much as some of the open AIs, and that's worth keeping in mind. Noreen says there are AI books which seem to look legitimate, so it's also something to be aware of. There's some other comments there by Stephen as well. Another comment about limit and risk, maybe the risk of people not believing the results of the conclusions if there's too much AI involvement in analyzing them. Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky balance, absolutely. Okay, well let's move on. So what we're trying to do with this resource is to apply AI, as I said, in the higher degree life cycle. We will most likely be structuring the AI hub around these major sections of the research life cycle. One application is in idea generation and proposal development. I'll show you a couple of examples of scenarios that we're drafting in that space, but it certainly can be a useful tool for brainstorming, refining research questions, testing assumptions, identifying novel angles that you might not have thought about, even for structuring something like a research proposal. It is a great tool for quickly scanning and summarizing research articles, but there are some big caveats. There are some big caveats that go with each of these points. Um, uh, you certainly don't want to download 10 journal articles from Elsevier or from Sage or from one of the big publishers and just drop them into an AI. The publishers are not going to be very happy with you if you do that. And of course, even this use of AI requires critical verification of the sources and critical thought around the content that an AI might spit out after going through this process of synthesizing a big body of literature. But I find it can be a useful tool just for pulling out some of the key points. Um, Data coding, processing, and analysis, it's being used quite a lot now, particularly in our engineering schools, to help students write code. But in other research applications, it's also useful for qualitative research, for helping with transcription, or indeed for helping you extract key themes or concepts from your transcripts. NVivo now has an AI tool built into it, but of course you can get quite a good result by uploading interviews or focus group transcripts into an AI tool as well, notwithstanding some of the data security risks that we've already talked about. And it's also quite a useful tool for looking at quantitative information and seeing patterns in the data. So lots of different applications. This is not an exhaustive list, but what we're trying to do with the hub is just to give students some ideas about how they might use it in the life cycle and what might be okay ways to use it, what are going to be problematic ways to use AI. It is, I suspect it's the way most students are using it, and David's been commenting in the chat. David Roland has been also involved in supporting students around the use of AI, particularly in the writing and editing part of using AI. And it is a good tool for helping improve clarity, structure, tone, and coherence, and for helping you draft sections and transitions. But again, with the caveat that our position will be that students will need to rewrite that text, will need to fact check it, need to verify it to ensure that their academic voice comes through. But it can be a good sounding board, and it is a very effective editor in terms of helping you improve your writing. Referencing and citation management, perhaps sometimes overlooked, but there are some applications in that space, and some of the big software tools like EndNote and Zotero now are incorporating AI into their software as well. Visualization and presentation design. One of my students has used it extensively to generate visualizations that he's used as stimuli, because he's researching robots, and the things that he wants to simulate don't exist yet. So we can't just take a photo of one, but he was able to generate some very realistic visualizations that he could use as stimuli to collect data from respondents. It is a great tool for generating visualizations that could be used in PowerPoint presentations, and to translate sometimes quite complex data or information into visuals that help communicate and convey your ideas more clearly. And of course, it is a great tool for research dissemination. So writing up a journal article or a chapter for a PhD, and then dropping it in and saying, put this into everyday language that a 12-year-old could understand, so that you're creating a piece of translation work that can maybe go on a website, or could go into an industry report, or into another type of output to help you with your research dissemination. That is another obvious application, but again, comes with some risks, because you're putting a full chapter of your own work into a potentially a public tool that can leak. Yeah, so there's some good chat going on. I agree with your comment, Shannon. We need some clear guidance around using AI to summarize entire articles. Yeah, Nicole's got a pretty clear statement there. No copy pasting library articles into the AI, even the enterprise edition, because there are licensing restrictions set by the publishers. Yeah, so lots of comments in the chat there. Okay, so the way that we're formulating these usage scenarios or examples, so you can get your head around what we're trying to do, is we want to use a traffic light system. So when we present the scenarios to students, some of them will be a green light, yes, absolutely, go ahead, use it. The risk is pretty low. A lot of them are going to be amber light, use caution. It requires judgment and verification. And I think you can see already in the principles and some of the limitations and risks we talked about, a lot of those things fall into the grey area where you really want a human to be able to step in and authenticate and verify whatever the AI is producing, or you want a human to step in and think, is this really something I want to be putting into an AI in the first place? And there will be some examples in our scenarios that are stop, don't do this, and there are some in the chat already, because it undermines integrity or introduces some other kind of risk. So that's how we're setting it up. To give you a bit of an overview, as I said, at the moment we've got 18 scenarios. We might expand that out, because the working group, the advisory group, is still working on these and working through them. But our thinking at the moment generally is that the sorts of things that might go in the go box, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this. If any of these seem like they're included the wrong category, we certainly want to hear from you. But brainstorming ideas or outlining arguments, and I'll show you an example of what we're thinking of there in a minute. Grammar or style edits to your own text, so text that you've written versus text that an AI has written for you. Summarizing literature for your own understanding, with some of the caveats that we've heard already. You shouldn't be uploading full journal articles or text into the AI. Using AI to generate code that you test and understand, or AI generated visuals for presentations, obviously with acknowledgement with all of these. That's where we're thinking the reasonably safe applications of AI are. A lot of them sit in this middle box, as I've said. Use caution, so paraphrasing text our position will be that students will be advising students to rework and verify anything that's written by AI, particularly if they're using it to paraphrase text. AI suggestions for methods or analysis, again, needs to be cross-checked. So yes, can be useful, but with a lot of caveats, and needs to be verified and checked. AI restructuring of drafts. Again, we want our students to write in their own voice. So I think it's appropriate for us to say to students, if you're using it to restructure a draft, like an entire chapter, you've got to be very careful. AI literature triage, again, if you're using it to suggest literature or papers that you haven't written that you could incorporate, you've got to manually verify the sources to make sure that they actually exist and that the AI has not misrepresented something that the source has said. So it doesn't really replace the need to go away and read your sources and understand them and critically think about them. It is a help in terms of pointing you in the right direction, maybe saving some time in finding those sources, but there's still, I would suggest, a lot of academic work involved in doing this properly and critically reading through and evaluating the sources. AI coding suggestions. I'm not a coder, but we will be relying on some of the people on the panel that are from engineering for this point around use of AI for coding. Okay, and the sorts of things that we're quite concerned about students using AI for, submitting AI content as your own original work. Obviously, that would be a big no-no. That's why we're asking students to declare any AI use. Situations where using AI is specifically prohibited. So a lot of journal publishers explicitly prohibit use of AI in the peer review process, for example. But as we've seen in the chat as well, a lot of licensing limits our ability to take journal articles and upload them into an AI. Even just copying the text and pasting it in means that we're taking content where the copyright's potentially owned by someone else and sharing it on an AI. And those are things that we will be advising students not to do. So taking AI outputs as it is without verification. So this is really just the opposite of what's in the green and yellow box. Entering confidential or unpublished data into public AI tools, or using AI in ways that breach copyright, IP, or ethical standards. Those are the things that we need to be very careful about. Okay, any thoughts, any comments? I can see the chat's going pretty crazy. There's lots of chatter there, and I'll just allow you to keep chatting away because there are lots of very competent people in this in the session who I can see responding to a lot of the chatter going on and a lot of the questions that are being posted. And of course, if you've got some questions that you feel haven't been answered in the chat, we are going to move into panel mode fairly soon, and so we'll have a whole panel of people who may be able to tackle those questions. I'll show you 5 scenarios. As I said, there are 18, so this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to give you a feel for how we're structuring them at the moment. So the way we're framing them at the moment, and it will be that traffic light system, it's just for this presentation, I've decided to go green light, red light, rather than green, amber, and red, because it got too complicated to do that on a slide presentation. Brainstorming. Our scenario around brainstorming is a little bit like this one on the screen. The scenario is that you use ChatGPT or Claude to generate a list of potential research questions or to explore theoretical perspectives as part of your initial scoping for your project. So we think that's okay for students to use it as a guided brainstorming tool. They're using it as an academic resource to inspire them or to stimulate their thinking, but they're still developing and owning their own research direction. What would not be okay would be asking AI to generate a full research proposal or a conceptual framework or a set of research questions, and then using it without any modification or disclosure. That would be in the red light kind of area because it crosses into territory where AI is contributing the substantive intellectual content when that intellectual content should be coming from the student. Generating research questions. So maybe you use the AI to test several versions of your research questions to identify phrasing that aligns with your intended theoretical focus. But you're the person that still wrote those questions. You're just using AI as an assistant, as a tool to say, here are my questions. Can you make them better? Or can you critique them? Or can you suggest some ways that the expression could be improved? Our position at the moment is that that is a good use of AI, and it helps you critically reflect and iterate on your ideas. It's like a digital sounding board, but you still retain intellectual ownership because you wrote the original content, the questions in the first place. If you ask ChatGPT to generate a full research question or aims or hypotheses, you just paste that into a journal article or a thesis, I would be very concerned because AI then has become, again, the source of that intellectual foundation. So the principle here is a bit the same as the previous slide, where the intellectual input should be coming from the student, not the AI. Summarizing literature, you use a Perplexity to, which is another AI tool, to identify and summarize key themes from recent publications, and you verify them by reading and citing the original text. So you actually take what the AI has given you and you go and read those sources, you verify that they exist and that they haven't been misrepresented. That is, in a lot of cases, a very smart way to use AI. But as we've said before, with a big caveat, the students shouldn't be uploading full papers because they may violate the terms of licensing agreements of the publishers. If you're copying AI-generated summaries of articles and just drop them straight into your literature review, clearly that's not okay. That's academically dishonest and really undermines the credibility of the whole research process, which is meant to be a critical thinking scholarly process. Analyzing data, you extract anonymized, de-identified trends from your data set, you put them into ChatGPT to identify maybe some coding frameworks or to help you fit them into a conceptual framework or to help you with some of the synthesis. Okay, if no identifiable and sensitive data is being shared, AI is being used again as a brainstorming tool to help you make sense of this. It's not processing raw data, but you do need to consider the potential for data or IP leakage. If you were to upload confidential participant data or industry data sets directly into ChatGPT or Claude or any of these AIs, you might be violating ethical approvals, and somebody mentioned ethics before in the chat. That data is no longer being stored in a secure environment. As soon as you've uploaded it to the AI, it's in a public space. There might be data use agreements. Certainly, you're going to be breaching UQ's data management policies and procedures, and we're trying to avoid that. So public AI tools can store input data, and that creates a risk for IP loss or data leakage. So that's our advice in that domain. One of the more common ones is editing and translation. As I've said, so the distinction here is between the green light and the red light is if you draft the text yourself in English or in another language, maybe English is not your first language, then you use these tools to translate, check the grammar, improve the clarity, refine fluency. This might be in an orange box, haven't decided yet. I need the advisory group's advice on this one rather than an outright green box. But the underlying principle here is that the idea is the intellectual contribution, the idea is the structure and the argument is still your own, but AI is supporting communication, not doing the thinking for you. Something we need to be careful of as a university is when students come here to do a Master of Philosophy or a PhD in English, we have an obligation to develop their English language proficiency. So the caution here and the risk is that if students rely too much on AI, they're not developing their English language proficiency. But I can also see how AI might be used as a tutor or a buddy or a mentor if you're using it in the right way to actually help you improve your English language proficiency. So it's, again, a fine balance, and a lot of these scenarios are very nuanced, and there's a lot of gray area. But I think for us, our position is if you verify the accuracy of the information and you disclose your UAR use in that particular scenario, that's probably going to be okay. But if you're just typing up some rough notes, or you're writing up something in another language and you accept AI's written paragraphs without reviewing them, without verifying the content, and then submitting that text as your own without any disclosure, that again crosses over into academic dishonesty, I would argue. It shifts the authorship to the AI. There's a risk of misinterpretation and the AI misrepresenting your ideas and changing potentially your academic voice. So that scenario is a lot more nuanced. There's a lot of grey in between those two, but I wanted to give you a feel for what we're thinking there. Finally, before we cross over to the panel, I just wanted to outline for you that this AI Hub is not the only thing we're doing in the higher degree research space. It sits within a broader AI governance framework that we've developed. And that framework includes things like using our progress reviews to test or ask candidates to demonstrate conceptual ownership, methodological reasoning, and independent thinking. I think as supervisors, if you're working closely with a student, you're meeting with them regularly and seeing the work that they produce, it would be difficult for a student to get away with unethical AI use. But it does happen, and some supervisors are very hands-off, so I can see why there might be issues. So certainly at that point where students come back 3 times during their CAN to do a progress review, that seems to me to be a logical point for us just to test a little bit how much of the work is the students' work. We are toying with the idea at the moment of asking students to declare AI use not only in their thesis, but also when they go to their progress review. But we still need to work through that. The oral examination, UQ is one of the first universities in Australia to introduce an oral examination for higher degree research students. They are common overseas, of course, but not until very recently. We're not very common in the higher degree context in Australia. In hindsight, that has turned out to be a very good thing from an AI perspective. When we did this back in 2017, we didn't anticipate what would happen with AI and ChatGPT. But in hindsight, it has worked out very well because that oral examination does give the examiners the opportunity to probe candidates and potentially to expose over-reliance on AI. And as somebody in the chat said, we're going to have to do some work with the information that we give our examiners as well for that to work properly. Secure platforms. So we're encouraging candidates to use UQ-supported sovereign AI. Amber just emailed me before the session to say Enterprise Copilot's not a sovereign AI. And that's correct. It's just a ring-fenced enterprise version of Copilot. So I should point out that error on the slide. But there is a lot of talk within the research portfolio around UQ developing its own sovereign AI capability, which may help us with some of these issues where we really need an AI to help us with something in the research journey, but we don't want to upload that to a public AI. So once we develop some of that capability, we will certainly be steering our students towards some of those tools. Disclosure and documentation. Candidates should transparently disclose how AI contributed to their work. And we've already talked about how we're supporting candidates to do that through the thesis template. Candidates are expected to verify accuracy and validity, we've talked about already. And then, of course, the capability building, which is what the AI Hub is all about. So this sits within a broader framework. So we want your feedback. I'll be downloading the chat from this session. So all the suggestions that you've typed into the chat on the slides where I've asked you for your input, we will feed into the process. But if you think about anything else, content gaps, is there anything essential or critical that you think is really important to have in the hub that's missing? Let us know. The tool coverage, if there are particular AI tools you want us to cover off on. We've got to walk a fine line because we don't want it to look like we're recommending these tools to students. But I think we do have an obligation to say here is the range of tools that you can use, and that will obviously need to be updated as we go along. And we'd like some feedback on anything we can do to make the hub more useful for candidates. Should we have things like videos, for example? Should we have some interactive components where students can click through or do flip cards or answer some questions or use a checklist? Those are all thoughts that we've had that we would love to have some more information on. Okay, so any suggestions, concerns, or innovations or ideas, pop them into the chat. Or if you don't want to put anything in the chat, you can email me, Pierre Benkendorf. I'm the only Pierre Benkendorf in the university, so my email address is pretty easy to find. I'm the Deputy Dean of the Graduate School, so feel free to email me some suggestions as well. So the panel we've got Stan here standing by. We've got Amber in as well, and Fran. Now Stan is a researcher in the UQ Business School, and as I mentioned before, Stan's been delivering for a while now into the career development framework here at UQ. The career development framework is our smorgasbord, our buffet of different courses that students can do, and Stan's been running some courses there on AI, but he also has run lots of workshops on AI for other groups and cohorts as well. So he's got his finger on the pulse in terms of some of the things that are worrying students, the questions they're asking, and where some of the tensions and grey areas lie. So I thought Stan would be an excellent person to have on the panel. Amber, some of you may recognise as previously linked with the UQ Library and has been doing a lot of work with the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research, including the guidelines that the university is developing for researchers. Hi, Amber. And then Fran. Fran is a high degree research student, and Fran is actually looking at AI use in international students. I hope I've presented that correctly, Fran, but is also our 3-minute thesis competition winner this year for UQ. I think the first time ever that Humanities and Social Sciences have won the 3-minute thesis competition. So when I first saw Fran's presentation at the HAS faculty final, I thought I must have Fran on my advisory group. She's right up to speed with all of the research in this space, and of course is able to provide a student perspective as well. So thanks for joining us, Fran. I am going to just jump out of the slide deck there and stop sharing my screen. So that you can better see the panel members, and I'm going to encourage you now to drop some questions into the chat if you've got some questions for the panel members. But I do have some questions just to get us started. I did ask each of the panel members if they wanted to present briefly before we launch into questions. Did any of you want to present, or do you want to go straight into the questions?
Happy to go straight into the questions, Pierre.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to check in case you'd spent a lot of time preparing a little presentation. So happy to go to the questions. So I might just start by, I gave a brief introduction, but I might just start by getting each of you to introduce yourself a bit more fully to give the participants in the session a bit more background about where you're coming from. So I might start with you, Stan.
Sure. Thanks, Pierre. So I'm a professor of information systems. A lot of my work takes place in the digital space. And over the last few years, it's more and more focused on AI. In fact, I think most, if not all of my students now study AI in some shape or form related to business and its applications. I'm also the director of the PhD program in the business school, and also heavily involved in delivering AI and writing AI and PhD research sessions to HDRs across the university. I think now probably delivered to over 2,500 students across UQ and other parts of the world. And it's been really fascinating to get insights into how students are using AI and the challenges they face, but also to really understand some of the unexpected tensions that students face now. Really, this cohort of students is, I call them the AI guinea pigs in many ways, because with a wonderful tool that can allow all sorts of things and all sorts of shortcuts as well. And it creates lots of, I think, anxiety for students. So I think this workshop and all the things Pierre's doing are really fascinating and helpful for students.
Thanks, Stan. Fran, do you want to just give us a quick intro?
So, hi, hello everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me, for being part of this panel and also the AI Hub for HDR students. I think it's an amazing initiative, a much needed initiative, and students are craving for those, sort of guidelines and scenarios. And I think the work is incredible and highly valued for students. So yeah, I am Fran. I am currently a PhD student at the School of Languages and Cultures. So for my research, I'm trying to understand the role of AI in supporting the academic English needs of international students. So I have kind of like two parts in my research. So I'm trying to understand how students themselves are using AI, and not looking only at writing, but also at reading, academic reading, listening, and speaking. And also in the second part, I have also done a bit of work with academics and professional staff to see their perspectives in terms of, how they see the use and the value of AI to support the English needs of international students. So there were a lot of questions and comments in the chat that are very related to the things that I'm trying to understand. And also I've been talking a lot to students about what they're doing, what they're not doing. So yeah, I would love to share some examples and ideas that I've seen. But yeah, I think that's a bit of a brief intro about my work.
Great, thanks, Fran. And Amberin?
Thanks, Pierre. Hi, everybody. So I'm currently the Director of Research Environment in the Office of the PBCR. And as Pierre mentioned, I pulled together a document, actually it was late last year, trying to provide some guidance to the UQ research community about AI, the opportunities and the threats that it possesses. I do just want to highlight that I'm not an AI expert in any shape or form, but I guess I'm just kind of AI curious and follow sort of what's going on in that space. And to pull together that guidance document, I actually worked quite extensively with AI experts across UQ. So researchers who have an AI background, as well as academics who use AI in their teaching and research, and including researchers who are very much AI, more on the AI skeptics side and caution against too much reliance on AI. So the underlying philosophy behind that guidance document was not to say this is how you can use it. It was more, so it wasn't trying to promote usage, sorry, it was trying to enable appropriate usage rather than promote it. And I think that's generally the tone of what this HDR student and AI Hub is also going to do. It's not telling HDR students the things they can use. It's not trying to promote any one tool. It's really just a way of saying, if you're going to use it, these are the things you need to be mindful of. So today, because I'm looking at my role as sort of research environment, I thought that the spin I could bring to this conversation is really thinking about that broader research environment. So not how it impacts the individual, but perhaps some of those more system-wide problems. So the issues that we have within scholarly publishing generally around paper mill activity and how that compromises the research effort of everybody. And I also just want to shout out to my library colleagues. I used to work in the library, and it was really great to see them weigh in today in the chat with some very detailed advice and very accurate advice. So I saw that there were really great comments by Stefan and Nicole and Martin and Kirsty. There may have been some others as well. So I just encourage you all to reach out to the library if you've got specific questions, because they really do have a lot to offer in this space.
Great, thanks, Amber. So just reminding you, if you've got some questions for our panel, pop them in the chat. I'm going to kick off with a couple. I can see there are some questions there already, but I'm going to start with some high level questions. And this question's probably more for Stan and Fran, although you may have used it as well, Amber, for research. But I wonder if you could share with us any examples where AI has genuinely improved your research process.
It's a good question, Pierre. And I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it in the context of, does it make my research higher quality? Does it allow me to do more work overall? Or does it allow me to be more efficient? Other than some marginal gains in maybe understanding a new concept or helping to edit some text when I'm feeling a little bit lazy, I'd find it difficult to say that it's made me more efficient or effective. In fact, sometimes using these tools can take just as much time as doing things yourself properly, right? If you want to engage with the content and not outsource that cognitive effort to these tools, there's no shortcuts. There still takes time. And just on that, I mean, one point I say often to PhD students is when you finish your PhD, what will differentiate you from other people when it comes to job interviews is knowing stuff. That's the secret sauce to getting an academic job. You demonstrate that you are a domain expert in a particular area. And over relying on these tools, I think a little bit too much during that process when you should be learning and developing yourself, it can come back to bite you in the backside during that process. One thing I have learned, Pierre, which I think I might share as well, is through this process of experimenting. So I'm experimenting to see how I can get better at it. I'm experimenting to understand how students use it more. But one thing conclusion I have come to is that thinking is writing and writing is thinking. So relegating that process to the AI means that I'm more so not thinking and not learning, not conceptualizing as deeply as I could have.
Great, thanks, Stan. Fran, anything to add?
Yes, so I was just thinking while Stan was talking, in terms of maybe some examples that I could share. And yeah, I always wonder as well if by using AI, what I'm producing is better, if I'm being faster or not, because sometimes, I end up spending more time, thinking and refining and rethinking. But what I think for me, in one example that I really like, that I think the result was, I don't know if the better is the word, but for my 3-minute thesis, so I had to rehearse several times because I had to memorize my speech, and I used AI quite a lot because especially during the day and sitting here in my office at home, I didn't have any human being that I could practice my speech with. And in this way, I think AI gave me lots of suggestions of things. Okay, maybe you have to improve your intonation, like in this way. Maybe you have to be more engaging in that way. And also, I created lots of flashcards and lots of quiz questions to help me remember that script and to also to evaluate my own script. So I think this is one of the ways that I've been using quite a lot in terms of research dissemination for my 3-minute thesis presentation, but also for any other presentation or anything that I have, like for example, for this panel that I have to participate. Usually what I do is, I write my own script. I think of, okay, what can I talk about? What are my ideas? And then I go to AI to kind of get some feedback. Okay, so is what I'm saying good enough? Do you have some other suggestions? Especially when, as I said before, I don't have access to like a human being that could give me this sort of feedback. And another use that I think is a bit different from what I've seen is that I created an agent. So because I'm studying AI, and AI is evolving so fast, and there's so many, podcasts, videos, research articles, there's so much going on. It's hard to keep up. So I created an agent for me that twice a week it goes out to the web, like, and I included like YouTube, podcast, open source, Google Scholar, all of these places where we can find information. And then the agent puts into a spreadsheet what are the main articles and main videos being published about AI in education, about AI in teaching and learning. And then it also gives me a summary. And I see that in the chat, there's a lot of discussion about summary, whether it's good or not. The way I do it is it's not to replace reading, because I think reading or watching videos, listening to podcasts is so important. But with my agent, it creates summaries so I can read that and I can see if I should spend more time reading that in depth. So I pick from those because it's impossible to read everything. I don't have time, I wish I could read every single paper about AI. I wish I could watch every single YouTube video, but there's no time. So I use it in that way, not to replace my reading, but to selectively, like to select things out of that. And it's been very, very helpful. And of course, AI does not find all the articles. So I still need to go to the UQ library, to the databases to see if there's something else. But it's helping in those, I think those two areas. And these were like the main examples that I thought of sharing.
Great, excellent. And there's something you're saying in there that I know people in the chat have been talking about as well, that it can be very useful if you're using it more as a conversation tool. And it sounds like that's how you're using it with your 3MT, you're using it as a sounding board. Were you giving it the text, or were you actually talking to the AI and it was listening to your presentation?
Most of the times I was talking to AI, so I was using the voice function. I use ChatGPT or even Perplexity. I've been using Perplexity quite a lot recently. And yeah, just, I'm saying, okay, you are my audience. This is my 3-minute thesis. I'm going to rehearse. And then after that, give me feedback. And also based on your data, what did other previous 3-minute thesis winners did, and am I doing something similar to them or not? So I think this has been quite helpful. And for presentations as well, sometimes I practice my progress review presentations or any other presentations, and then see how it goes.
Yeah, great. That's not a use case we've got at the moment, but it sounds like a very useful way to use it. Amber, and anything to add? You in the work that you did with the PBC research, you spoke to lots of people across the university. Anything to add around the usefulness of AI and whether it's improving the research process?
Look, I think it's a mixed bag actually, and we've already heard that. But what I would say is that the danger is in the hidden AI, where it's not obvious that a tool is actually making use of generative AI in the background. So it's probably the case that many of our researchers are using generative AI on a daily basis, but they're just potentially not aware of all of those instances. So and that could be really helpful to them, the way it's implemented in different tools, but there is a real need for researchers and HDR students to be a little bit critical of all of the tools that they're using and try to understand how AI might be embedded within them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's embedded in Grammarly. So if you're using Grammarly, it's using an AI. It's obviously now being integrated in all the Microsoft suite with Copilot. Somebody before mentioned the Google, the AI that comes at the top of your search results. It's being embedded everywhere. I've noticed also in web browsers. So you could be just browsing a website, and the AI is being used to summarize a web page. Sometimes it's clear that it's AI generated, and you're right, Amber, and sometimes it's not, and that there is a lot of risk there. People don't realize that. Yeah. Okay. There are some questions coming up in the chat. Fran, somebody was asking. Oh, you've answered that already. Yes, you can talk into an AI. I find it easier and more intuitive to do on an iPad or a phone. I find the voice functionality works better, but you can do it on a computer as well. So there is a question there for the panel. What is your advice to students about how to keep up with UQ's guidance about AI usage as it changes? And they are particularly complimentary about your session, Stan. But I wonder what the panel's thoughts are on that. How do we keep updating the advice that we give students?
Look, I mean, the question is not just about the advice on the UQ from the hub or from our policies, but also as us as academics more broadly about norms from our academic bodies. I'm a part of the Association for Information Systems and Academy Management, and advice is changing regularly. These tools keep evolving at a rapid pace. I think fundamentally, you have to consider yourself as a responsible agent in using these tools. If you're using them to learn, and become a better academic, I think that is fine. The real gray area is when in the outputs that it generates. If you're over relying on outputs, right? So fundamentally, if you can stand by your work and say, this is my work, this is how I build these arguments, this is why it's factful and truthful, and so on. I think it's a safer way of thinking about engaging with AI rather than trying to follow the laws or the rules to the very letter.
Thanks, Stan. I should add, we do have members of of the library on our advisory panel as well, and that is important because we want to align whatever we do with what's happening in the publishing world as well. And the publishers, I think you'll see the publishers over the next couple of years become less conservative about AI. Some of them are still quite restrictive. But we're starting to see them open up. So yeah, there's lots of moving parts. There's lots of things going on in the space to keep on top of to make sure that we're giving our students the best advice. Anything to add, Fran or Amber, to that question?
I might just add that everything is governed actually by the Australian Code of Conduct, or Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research. So even though that code doesn't call out AI, if you read that code through the use of AI lens, most of the answers you will find there about what you're actually required to do as a researcher within the Australian context. The other thing that I'd like to add when we talk about the publisher landscape and also the reliance on AI outputs, it's not just your own AI outputs that you are relying on as a researcher, you're relying on the outputs of others. And I mentioned this earlier about the issue to do with paper mill activity, and I'd just like to focus on that for a minute, if that's okay, because there's a real problem within the scholarly publishing ecosystem at the moment with AI-generated research outputs infiltrating even high-quality journals, so journals with high impact factors. And prior to the launch of ChatGPT, it was estimated that around 2 to 3% of papers were AI-generated or had the hallmarks of being AI-generated. A recent paper from September this year indicated that in cancer research, that figure is as high as 10%, even in journals that have a high impact factor. And that was sufficient enough for someone who was high up within Victoria Health, to send an email out to all of Vic Health alerting clinicians to this, to say that clinical decisions could be compromised because the scholarly literature that they're relying on to make decisions is actually infiltrated or polluted by these AI-generated papers. Those AI-generated papers from these paper mills are up for so you can go and buy authorship. You can also buy patent ownership. So it's really, really big business. It's like industrialized cheating. Where I think we have a problem is not that we have UQ researchers or UQ HDR students actually buying authorship on these papers. But there is a real danger in citing this work or relying on this work. And that's exacerbated if all you're relying on is the AI-generated summaries, if you don't actually go to the outputs themselves. So there's other reasons why you need to deeply engage with the content that you're relying on to make sure it's not a consequence of poorly used AI.
Great, thanks, Amber.
And just Pierre, if I may add as well, I think from a student point of view, I think during our PhD we experienced a lot of, I don't know, lack of confidence, fear, and what I've seen in my research as well, that some students may use AI because they don't feel confident in what they are producing, or they don't feel confident in their own understanding of something. So I think yes, we can use these tools, they can be helpful. We also have to be careful about like what Stan and Amberly are saying in terms of the risks, and yes, but I think one thing that we have to remind ourselves is that even if we are not experts in the field yet, we should be confident in our own voice, in what we are developing, in what we are creating. So if we have that confidence, I think regardless of using or not using the tool, it will be more effective for our research. So that's usually the advice that I give when, because sometimes the students ask me, so Fran, what do you think? What should I be doing, or what should I not be doing? And I think it's important to believe in our voice, in what we produce, in our own understanding, maybe, and especially for international students, maybe like our English is not perfect, maybe we have lots of grammatical mistakes, but it's still, if we are building that knowledge and we are understanding that, I think we should be confident, and we should be happy to what we are contributing to. If it makes sense what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that is really the answer to some of the questions we're getting in the chat as well. AI, it needs to be checked and verified by students when they're using it. And I think that's one of the key principles and messages that we'd be promoting. Amber, there's a couple of questions. I can see that you've answered them in the chat. Did you want to add anything there?
I really just wanted to say that there are tools available. So publishers are catching up on trying to detect these papers that have been generated by AI. But as a reader, you can sometimes spot them because of things like, they're called tortured phrases, where the AI generator of these fake papers switches out commonly used phrases that are perfectly acceptable within the discipline. I can't, off the top of my head, think of an example at the moment. If you bear with me one moment, please. I will find one for you. Oh, yes. So an established phrase in a paper might be something like error signal. But if you read a paper that talks about a blunder signal, that's kind of tells you that that's not a person that's written that. Or remote sensing might become far off sensing, or true positive might become genuine positive. So it's things like that that can be an indicator. And there's a whole lot of other characteristics of AI-generated papers that are being used now to detect AI-generated papers. But the problem is, the more sophisticated the detection tools become, the more sophisticated the paper mill generators become. But there are a few things. I'll put one in chat to keep an eye out for. So I'll see if I can find some more to put in. And the problem of citing this work, it's called feet of clay. So it's where when you look at the citing article network over time, in a particular discipline, it's interesting to see which papers are relying on faulty papers. And so how does knowledge generation actually get compromised over time because of these feet of clay papers that are stuck with dodgy citations?
And just one thing to add to that, I think there were some questions about, unfortunately, we still don't have any, and there are lots of studies about that. We don't have any tool that can detect AI use or not in like 100% in a reliable way. There are a lot of tools out there trying to sell themselves as, yeah, we can detect if it was AI, if this was generated by AI or not, but we don't have that. And yes, we have some parts of like some sentence structure, some specific language use that might sound like AI generated, but sometimes it is not, because we can see in language studies that this AI use of language is being embedded more and more in the way we talk and in the way we write. So just we need to be careful when we say that, okay, so if we see this sentence, or if we see, well, even with the M dashes, a lot of people, when I see that it's AI generated, it's not always the case. So I just wanted to bring that. And we don't have any softwares that can detect that. So I think a lot of people are still kind of stuck in that. But the AI way of expressing itself is being incorporated more in the way we express ourselves as human beings. So we just need to be careful with that. Yeah.
Just to add to that, as an early career scholar during my PhD in particular, as I found my academic voice, I used to have a document where I'd copy and paste from PDFs, different ways of introducing an argument or making segues between paragraphs, etc. And over time, that would mean a 10, 20-page document. And that kind of evolved into my writing style. So you can see now, just to Fran's point, if you were to use my approach now, you'd be embodying the very AI language that we're critiquing as well. So it is quite flawed in many ways. Yeah, it's very interesting and how our writing is evolving based on these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we are coming close to 11 o'clock, so I might just very quickly go around our panel members and ask you for a very brief statement about whether you are optimistic or concerned about AI's impact on high degree research quality and integrity.
Maybe I'll go.
Oh, you go first, Stan.
Yeah, maybe I'll go first. So I think I'm a bit more, look, you've caught me on a day where perhaps I'm feeling a bit more pessimistic. So today I'm a bit more pessimistic. Other days I'm a bit more optimistic. And one of the conversations I've had recently with a PhD student, and not necessarily my own, is they said, ChatGPT said this. Like, we're having an argument. No, when I say argument, I mean a scholarly debate about a concept. And the person said, well, ChatGPT said this about it. And that made me cringe a little bit. It's not so much that the argument is wrong or right, but I would expect that, that a scholar would go off and double check those things and find out whose point of view that is and so on. So as of today, I'm a bit more pessimistic. Ask me again next week, I might be optimistic. But I do think that it's a difficult time for PhD students. It's very tricky to navigate this. But if you stick with, you are the expert, you are responsible for everything that you develop, and you are the domain expert in this area, I think you can't go wrong.
Great, thank you. Amber?
I'd sit on the fence here, actually. I'm really concerned about the broader environment, so that the system-wide issues that AI presents, I think are really concerning at kind of a fundamental level. But I'm much more optimistic about the responsible and ethical use of it at the level of how individuals within UQ might be able to leverage its capability. And those two, there's a tension between those two things, but I think having that tension is a good thing. I also think there's an awful lot of, I have a lot of optimism about the research that's underway that's directly into developing AI capabilities in specific disciplines and developing much better learning models that have had high quality training data sitting, not proper data sitting behind them, where there's real controls over it. So I can't give you an answer either way, unfortunately. But what I would say is, from an HDR student perspective, as long as you have a healthy dose of skepticism coupled with curiosity, resilience, agility, and a willingness to keep learning, you'll be fine.
Right, excellent. And Fran, final comment from you?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I don't really like this question, because I think we should be, especially at this time, we should be evolving from I like it or I hate it. And I think that's most of what we've seen, and something in the middle should be what's happening. And it's not like I love AI or I hate it, I'm a positive or a pessimistic about that, but something in the middle that I think, and that's why I think the work that we are doing with the hub is good, because we are presenting, you know, things that can help, but things that to be cautious about. So somewhere in the middle, yeah, instead of, you know, I'm positive or negative about it. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Fran. It's only fair that I answer the question too. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I can certainly see the pros and the cons of AI. But as I said earlier in the presentation, for me, it's like opening Pandora's box, and the box is open now. The genie's out of the bottle, and we've got to make the best of it. And there are certainly some opportunities. Okay, look, I don't to keep you any longer. Amber's been posting in the chat the link for the evaluations. I would love to get your feedback on how this session went. But if you want more information, as Amber's already said, the library is a great resource. There are lots of resources on there already, and people have been citing some of those. Thanks, Nicole, in the chat. Stan runs sessions in the CDF for students. David Rowland also runs sessions through student support for students, and I know that the library runs sessions also for staff. So there is a lot of support around. It is fragmented at the moment, and we hope that the hub will kind of pull a lot of these resources together for students and for supervisors. Look, I hope that's been an interesting way to spend your Friday morning. Thank you very much for joining us, and we're going to sign off there. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.